Her billionaire father didn't just abandon her. He drove her to the top of a remote African mountain, opened the door, pushed her out with a dog, and flew away, fully expecting her to die. The cold air burned her lungs, blood soaked into the rocks beneath her bare hands. The dog whimpered beside her, loyal wounded, refusing to leave. Above them, the sound of helicopter blades faded into silence. No phone, no food, no mercy. That night, as darkness swallowed the mountain, Naomi Ajayi realized the truth. She wasn't abandoned by accident. She was erased on purpose. And yet, death did not take her. Before we enter this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. And if you believe stories of survival deserve to be told, subscribe to this channel, because what she became would one day destroy the man who left her there. Anthony Ajayi was not born cruel. He learned it. In the corridors of power where African wealth was forged and broken softness was treated like a disease. Anthony had risen from modest beginnings to become one of the most feared names in the mining industry, a man whose signature could displace villages or create cities. Newspapers called him disciplined, rivals called him ruthless, investors called him reliable. At home, silence followed him like a shadow. The Ajayi mansion sat on a hill overlooking the city, guarded, polished, impressive, and emotionally empty. Staff moved carefully. Voices stayed low. Nothing disrupted Anthony Ajayi's order, except Naomi. She was the child he never planned, the consequence of a brief relationship he had buried long before his fortune exploded. When Naomi's mother fell ill and died, there had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful promise. Anthony simply agreed to bring the girl into his house, out of duty, out of obligation, not out of love. From the moment Naomi arrived, it was clear where she stood. She wore clean clothes, attended good schools, ate full meals, but she was never claimed, never introduced as my daughter. In public, she was referred to as a relative. In private, she was mostly ignored. Anthony convinced himself this was mercy. He told himself he had given her opportunity, shelter, safety, more than the world had offered millions of children. What he never gave her was warmth. Naomi felt it immediately. Children always do. She learned early not to ask questions, not to cling, not to hope too loudly. When Anthony passed her in the hallway, she stood straight and greeted him politely like a visitor. Sometimes he nodded, often he didn't. She studied his face in silence, searching for something, recognition, regret, anything. But his eyes slid past her, already focused on the next call, the next deal, the next problem worth his attention. That distance became her daily reality. Then came Gloria Ajayi. Anthony married Gloria when Naomi was still young enough to believe things could change. Gloria was elegant, sharp, and deeply aware of her position. She had not married Anthony for love. She had married him for permanence, security, legacy. Naomi threatened all three. At first, Gloria's hostility was subtle, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, instructions to staff that somehow never included Naomi, gentle corrections spoken just loudly enough to humiliate. She must learn her place, Gloria would say lightly, as if discussing table manners. Anthony heard these comments. He chose not to hear them. He told himself women needed time to adjust, that family harmony required patience, that intervening would only create drama. So he stayed neutral, and neutrality in a house like that was cruelty. As years passed, Naomi grew quieter, more observant. She learned the rhythms of the house, the hours Gloria felt powerful. The moods Anthony carried home, the places where she was safest, being invisible. When Ethan Ajayi was born, everything shifted. Anthony held his son openly. He smiled without restraint. He laughed. Naomi watched from a distance as the house transformed around the baby boy. New security systems, new celebrations, new attention. Ethan was the future. Naomi was the past. Anthony wanted erased. Gloria's contempt sharpened. She spoke often about reputation, about enemies waiting for weakness, about loose ends. Her words were never direct, but her meaning was clear. Men like you, she once said to Anthony over dinner, cannot afford shadows following them forever. Anthony didn't respond. But the idea stayed. Naomi overheard more than they realized. Children in quiet houses often do. She heard her name spoken in fragments, in warnings, in complaints. She began to understand something terrifying. Her existence was inconvenient. One evening, after being excluded from a family event she hadn't even known about, Naomi stood alone in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. She didn't cry. She rarely did anymore. Instead, she asked herself a question that would change everything. If I disappeared, Would anyone look for me downstairs? Anthony sat in his study reviewing reports. His company was expanding into remote regions, mountains, forests, places few outsiders dared enter. Locations where accidents happened, where mistakes were hard to trace. Gloria poured him a drink and spoke softly. "You work too hard," she said. "You need rest, fresh air, maybe a short trip, somewhere quiet." Anthony looked up distracted. "For the family," she added. "A bonding experience." The idea sounded harmless, reasonable, even generous. For the first time in a long while, Anthony thought of Naomi not as a problem, but as a responsibility he could finally resolve. A plan began to take shape in his mind, dressed as opportunity disguised as care. And Naomi, unaware of the decision being formed around her life, lay awake that night listening to the distant hum of the city. She didn't know yet that the man whose name she carried was already imagining a world without her, a world where the mountain would swallow his mistake. The plan did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, wearing the mask of reason. Anthony Ajayi began to convince himself that he was doing what any powerful man would do, protecting his legacy. Every empire had sacrifices buried beneath it. Roads were built over forgotten villages. Wealth rose from silence. History, he believed, favored the decisive, and Naomi had become complicated. She was growing older now, smarter, more observant. The way she watched conversations, the way she listened without speaking. Anthony noticed it in passing and dismissed it just as quickly. He told himself she was harmless, just a quiet girl. But Gloria did not dismiss anything. She planted thoughts gently like seeds dropped into fertile soil. "She's asking questions," Gloria said one night as they prepared for bed. "Questions," Anthony replied absently. "About her mother. About your past. About why she's treated differently." Anthony frowned, not because the accusations shocked him, but because they irritated him. "She has a right to curiosity," he said. Gloria turned to him slowly. "And the world has a right to use that curiosity against you." She spoke calmly, not accusing, not emotional. That was her power. She never begged Anthony to choose her. She simply reminded him of the cost of choosing otherwise. "She's a loose thread," Gloria continued, "and loose threads unravel everything." Anthony said nothing. Silence was his refuge. Over the following weeks, the idea evolved. Not a crime, not violence, just distance, finality, a clean end, a short trip, a mistake, an accident no one would question. Anthony justified it endlessly. He told himself Naomi would survive on her own. Children in villages endured worse. Life hardened people. Perhaps she would even be stronger for it. And if she didn't, that thought he refused to complete. When he finally announced the trip, Naomi was stunned. "We're going away?" she asked, unsure she had heard correctly. Anthony nodded, not meeting her eyes. "Just for a day. The mountains, fresh air." It was the first time he had invited her anywhere alone. Hope, dangerous, foolish hope, rose inside her chest. That night, Naomi packed quietly. She folded her clothes carefully, unsure what to bring. Unsure what this meant. In her small bag, she placed a photograph of her mother worn at the edges. She hesitated, then added a piece of bread she had saved from dinner. Downstairs, Hunter waited. The dog had always been drawn to Naomi, loyal without reason, protective without instruction. When she knelt to scratch behind his ears, his tail thumped against the floor like a promise. "You're coming too," Anthony said when he saw them together. "Might as well." Naomi smiled, a real smile, the kind that surprised her with its own warmth. The drive was long. The city gave way to dirt roads, then narrow paths cutting through trees and rock. Naomi watched the scenery change, her excitement slowly giving way to unease. "Are we far?" she asked. Anthony nodded. "Almost there." He did not say much after that. When they reached the mountain, the air was colder, thinner. The view stretched endlessly, beautiful and terrifying all at once. Anthony stopped the car near a rocky clearing. "This is it," he said. Naomi stepped out, clutching her bag. Hunter close behind her. She looked around confused. "Where are we staying?" she asked. Anthony turned away, pretending to check his phone. "Walk around. I'll be right back." Something in his voice made her stomach tighten. Minutes passed. The wind howled softly. Naomi wandered a few steps, then stopped when she heard the engine start. She turned. Anthony was already inside the car. "Dad," she called the word, slipping out before she could stop it. He didn't answer. The car rolled forward. At first, Naomi didn't understand. She thought maybe he was parking somewhere else. Maybe there was a cabin nearby. Then the car turned. Then it accelerated. "Wait!" she screamed, running after it, her feet slipping on loose stones. Hunter barked wildly beside her. The car did not stop. The dust settled slowly. The sound of the engine faded into nothing. Naomi stood frozen, breathless, staring at the empty road. The truth crashed over her in a single, unbearable wave. He wasn't coming back. She screamed his name until her throat burned. She chased the path until her legs gave out. She fell to her knees, sobbing into the dirt, Hunter pressing against her as if trying to hold her together. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the mountain. Naomi realized she had no signal, no food beyond a single piece of bread, no shelter, and no father. Night fell brutally. The cold crept into her bones. The wind howled louder now, carrying unfamiliar sounds. Naomi huddled against a rock. Hunter curled around her, his body warm, trembling. She whispered to herself again and again like a prayer she wasn't sure anyone heard. He'll come back. He has to. But even as she said it, she knew. This wasn't abandonment born of anger or impulse. This was decision. Far away, Anthony Ajayi sat in his helicopter staring straight ahead as the mountain disappeared beneath the clouds. His hands were steady, his face unreadable. He told himself he was doing what was necessary. He told himself the mountain would erase his mistake. What he did not know, what no one could have predicted, was that Naomi Ajayi was not meant to vanish quietly, and that the night he left her to die would one day return to claim everything he had built. Night on the mountain was nothing like the darkness Naomi had known before. This darkness was alive. It crept between the rocks, settled into the trees, and pressed against her skin with an icy patience. The wind did not simply blow, it whispered, carrying sounds she could not place. Branches cracked somewhere below, stones shifted under unseen weight. Naomi pulled her knees to her chest, her back against a jagged boulder. Hunter curled tightly around her legs. His body trembled not just from cold but from tension. His ears twitched constantly, tracking movements she could not see. She tried to stay calm. Panic, she remembered reading once, made people stupid. Panic killed faster than hunger, so she breathed. In, out, slow. Her hands shook as she checked her small bag again, as if something new might appear. The photograph of her mother. A piece of bread already stiff from the cold. Nothing else. No, she whispered. This can't be real. She stood up suddenly and shouted into the darkness. Dad? Her voice echoed off the rocks, came back to her, distorted and empty. Anthony Ajayi, she screamed, anger breaking through fear. Come back. The mountain answered with silence. Hours passed in fragments. Naomi didn't know how long she cried, how long she sat staring into nothing, how long she whispered arguments with a father who wasn't there to hear them. She remembered moments she had once clung to as proof that he cared, the time he corrected a teacher who had mispronounced her surname, the way he once nodded when she did well on an exam, the silence he offered instead of comfort when her mother died. She had mistaken absence for restraint, distance for discipline, cruelty for strength. Now the truth was impossible to deny. Anthony Ajayi had not left her by mistake. He had chosen this mountain over her life. Hunter shifted suddenly, letting out a low growl. Naomi froze. Her heart hammered painfully in her chest. Easy, she whispered, placing a hand on his back. It's okay. But she didn't believe it. Something moved beyond the trees, slow, heavy. Naomi grabbed a rock, clutching it uselessly in her fist. She knew it wouldn't save her. She knew she was small, weak, exposed. The sound came closer, then stopped. Moments stretched unbearable. Finally, whatever it was moved away. Naomi sank back against the rock tears, streaming silently down her face. She pressed her forehead into Hunter's fur, breathing in his scent, grounding herself. I don't want to die here, she whispered. Please. She didn't know who she was speaking to anymore. God, the mountain, her mother. As the night dragged on, the cold became sharper, more vicious. Her fingers went numb. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She tried stamping her feet, rubbing her arms, but the relief never lasted. At some point, exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of falling. She woke with a scream as rain began to pour. It wasn't gentle. It was violent, slamming against the rocks, soaking her clothes within minutes. The ground beneath her turned slick. Water streamed down the mountain in thin, icy rivers. Hunter barked, panicked, trying to push her toward a small overhang nearby. Okay, Naomi gasped. Okay. She stumbled after him, slipping twice, scraping her hands on sharp stone. By the time they reached the shallow shelter, her palms were bleeding. The overhang barely protected them, but it was something. The rain soaked Hunter completely. He shook violently, his movements growing weaker. Naomi wrapped her arms around him, pressing her body against his, trying to share warmth. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "You can't leave me too." Hunter whined softly, licking her cheek once as if answering. Dawn came slowly, reluctantly. The sky lightened just enough to reveal the damage. Naomi's clothes were torn. Her hands were swollen and raw. Her lips were cracked. Hunter limped slightly, one paw, bleeding from a deep cut. They had survived the night, barely. The morning did not bring hope. It brought reality. Naomi stood and scanned the horizon. No roads, no buildings, no signs of people, just endless ridges and valleys. She realized then that waiting was death. If she stayed here, the mountain would finish what her father had started. "We have to move," she told Hunter, her voice hoarse. He looked up at her, tired but alert. She tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped it clumsily around his injured paw. Then she broke the piece of bread in half, giving him the larger portion. "I'll be fine," she lied. They began to walk. Every step was agony. The terrain was uneven, unforgiving. Naomi's legs burned. Her head throbbed. The sun climbed higher, turning the damp cold into a suffocating heat. Hours passed. At some point, Naomi stumbled and fell hard. Her vision blurred. She tasted blood. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this." Hunter stood over her, barking sharply, nudging her shoulder insistently. She laughed weakly through tears. "You're not letting me give up, are you?" She pushed herself up again. By midday, Naomi was dizzy. Her steps slowed. The world tilted. Then she saw it. Smoke, thin, faint, rising from far below. Hope exploded inside her chest, sharp and painful. "Hunter," she cried. "Look." They changed direction, forcing their bodies downhill toward the sign of life. Each step was a gamble. Loose stones slid beneath their feet. Naomi fell again, this time hitting her head. She lay still, the sky spinning above her. Hunter barked desperately, circling her, licking her face, whining. She tried to respond. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Footsteps. Voices. Naomi forced her eyes open as shadows fell across her. A woman's face appeared above her, dark lined, shocked. "Jesus," the woman murmured. "This child." Hands lifted Naomi gently. Another set of arms scooped Hunter up. Naomi tried to speak, tried to explain. Instead, she slipped into darkness, her last conscious thought painfully clear. Anthony Ajayi had left her to die, but the mountain had refused to take her. Naomi drifted in and out of consciousness, her body no longer able to tell the difference between pain and relief. When she opened her eyes again, the first thing she noticed was warmth. Not the burning heat of the sun, not the suffocating closeness of fear, but real warmth. Human warmth, the kind that wrapped around her instead of attacking her. She was lying on a woven mat inside a small hut. The roof above her was made of dried leaves and wood patched carefully to keep out the rain. Smoke hung faintly in the air, carrying the scent of herbs and cooked grains. For a moment, Naomi thought she was dreaming. Then she heard a familiar sound, a soft whine. She turned her head slowly and saw Hunter lying nearby, his body stretched out, his injured paw wrapped in clean cloth. His chest rose and fell steadily. When he sensed her movement, his eyes opened and his tail thumped weakly against the floor. Relief hit her so hard it hurt. "You're here," she whispered. Her voice came out cracked, barely audible. Easy now. The voice was unfamiliar, female, calm, firm. Naomi turned her head toward the doorway and saw a woman standing there, her silhouette framed by daylight. She was older, her back slightly bent, her hair wrapped in a faded cloth. Her eyes were sharp, watchful, but not unkind. "You've been asleep for nearly a day," the woman said gently. "You're lucky." Naomi swallowed. Her throat burned. "Where am I?" she asked. "My name is Abena," the woman replied. "People call me Mama Abena. This is my home." Naomi tried to sit up and immediately winced as pain shot through her side. "Don't," Mama Abena said quickly, crossing the room to steady her. "Your body's not ready yet." Naomi's hands trembled as memories rushed back, the mountain, the cold, the car driving away. "My father," she began, then stopped. The words refused to come. Mama Abena studied her face carefully. She didn't interrupt. She had learned long ago that pain revealed itself when it was ready. "We found you halfway down the mountain," Mama Abena said instead. "You collapsed near the old path. Another hour, maybe less, you wouldn't be here." Naomi closed her eyes. She should have died. The thought came without drama, without self-pity, just fact. "Why did you help me?" Naomi asked quietly. Mama Abena smiled faintly. Because you were alive. The simplicity of the answer shattered something inside Naomi. Tears slid down her temples, soaking into the mat beneath her head. She turned her face away, embarrassed by the weakness. Mama Abena said nothing. She simply sat beside her, placing a rough, steady hand over Naomi's shaking fingers. Outside, life continued. Chickens clucked. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. The world had not stopped just because Naomi's had nearly ended. Later that day, a man arrived. He was tall, lean-dressed, simply carrying a worn medical bag. His movements were efficient, practiced. When he introduced himself, his voice was warm. "Dr. Tunde Adebayo," he said. "Mama Abena sent for me." He examined Naomi carefully, asking questions she struggled to answer. He checked her head, her ribs, her hands. He cleaned her wounds again, more thoroughly this time, applying herbs that stung sharply. "You're dehydrated," he said. "Malnourished, exhausted, but you're strong." Naomi laughed weakly at that. "She's stubborn," Mama Abena added. That helped. Dr. Adebayo smiled, then turned serious. "You're lucky the dog stayed with you," he said, glancing at Hunter. "Many people don't survive nights like that alone." Naomi looked at Hunter, guilt flooding her chest. "He protected me," she whispered. "I should have protected him." "You did," the doctor said quietly, "by staying alive." That night, Naomi slept deeply for the first time since the mountain. Her dreams were heavy, tangled with fear and memory, but they no longer felt like falling. When she woke the next morning, Mama Abena was cooking outside. The smell of food made Naomi's stomach twist painfully. Mama Abena noticed immediately. Slow, she warned, handing Naomi a small bowl. "Your body must remember how to eat." Naomi nodded and obeyed. Days passed. Her strength returned gradually, painfully. Each movement reminded her of how close she had come to disappearing. Dr. Adebayo visited regularly, monitoring her recovery, adjusting her treatment. Hunter healed faster than she did. His limp lessened each day, though the scar on his paw remained a reminder neither of them would ever forget. Naomi listened more than she spoke. She watched Mama Abena's routine, the way she worked tirelessly, the way villagers greeted her with respect, the way children clustered around her without fear. This world was nothing like the one Naomi had left behind. Here people had little, but they shared it. One afternoon, as Naomi sat outside watching the sun dip low, Mama Abena joined her. "You haven't told me how you came to be on that mountain," the older woman said gently. Naomi's hands clenched in her lap. "My father left me there," she said. Mama Abena didn't react. She didn't gasp or curse or ask why. "He's rich." Naomi continued, her voice flat, powerful. "He didn't want me." Silence stretched between them. "Some parents break what they cannot control," Mama Abena said finally. "It does not mean the child is broken." Naomi stared at the ground. "I thought if I was quiet enough, good enough, he would see me." Mama Abena reached out and tilted Naomi's chin upward, forcing her to meet her eyes. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You survived something that should have killed you. That is not nothing." Something shifted inside Naomi at those words. Not healing. Not yet. But something close. That night, Naomi overheard Mama Abena speaking with Dr. Adebayo outside. "She shouldn't go back," Mama Abena said. "Whoever did this will finish it." Dr. Adebayo sighed. "I agree. But she has to decide." Naomi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Go back where? There was no home waiting for her. No father who would come searching. In the world she had left, she was already gone. Days later, Naomi learned the truth that sealed her resolve. A traveling merchant arrived in the village, bringing news from the city. As villagers gathered to listen, Naomi sat nearby, pretending not to hear. "Anthony Ajayi," the man was saying. "Big businessman, recently announced a new project. Family man, they say. Family man." Naomi felt the words like a slap. "He listed his children," the merchant continued. "One son, no mention of any daughter." Naomi's breath caught. That night she didn't cry. She sat outside Hunter's head, resting on her lap, staring at the stars. In the eyes of the world, Naomi Ajayi was dead. And for the first time since the mountain, she made a decision of her own. If she was already erased, then she would decide who she became next. Recovery was not a straight road. It twisted, doubled back, and tested Naomi in ways she hadn't expected. Her body healed in stages, skin knitting together, bruises fading from purple to yellow, strength slowly returning to her limbs. But her mind was another matter. The mountain followed her into sleep. She woke some nights gasping, heart-racing fingers clawing at the mat as if the cold stone were still beneath her. Mama Abena noticed everything. She never scolded Naomi for the nightmares. She never asked too many questions. Instead, she gave Naomi small tasks, grinding grains, fetching water, helping mend torn clothes. Simple work, grounding work, the kind that anchored a person to the present. Your hands need to remember life. Mama Abena said one morning as Naomi struggled to lift a heavy pot. Not just fear. Naomi nodded and tried again. Dr. Tunde Adebayo continued to visit, sometimes staying longer than necessary. He spoke to Naomi as if she were capable, not fragile. He explained what had happened to her body, how close she had come to organ failure, how dehydration and exposure had nearly shut her down. "You survived because you moved," he told her, "because you refused to lie down and wait." Naomi absorbed that quietly. One afternoon, as she sat outside watching Hunter chase a chicken apologetically around the yard, Dr. Adebayo asked a question that made her stomach tighten. "What do you plan to do next?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. "I don't know," she said finally. "I can't go back." Dr. Adebayo nodded. "I wouldn't recommend it. I don't exist there anymore," Naomi added. "They've already decided who I am, or who I'm not." Mama Abena, who had been listening from a distance, approached slowly. "Then you begin where you are," she said, "and you grow outward." Naomi looked at her unsure. "I don't have anything," Naomi said. "No money, no papers, no family." Mama Abena smiled softly. "You have breath, you have will, and you have time." That night, Naomi made a choice, not dramatic, not loud, but firm. She would stay. The village did not welcome her with celebration or suspicion. It welcomed her with practicality. If she ate, she worked. If she worked, she belonged. Naomi learned quickly. She learned how to plant and harvest, how to carry water without spilling, how to listen to elders without interrupting, how to sit quietly when grief came and not let it consume her. She learned that pain didn't disappear. It transformed. Hunter became her constant companion, shadowing her steps, guarding her sleep. The villagers accepted him easily, as if they understood his importance without explanation. Weeks turned into months. Naomi grew stronger, taller, sharper. She asked Mama Abena one evening why she lived alone near the mountain. "I lost people," Mama Abena said simply. "Then I found others who needed me." Naomi understood. One day, Dr. Adebayo brought documents. "They're not official," he admitted, "but they'll help. A name, an age, something to begin with." Naomi stared at the paper, her name written in careful letters. "Naomi Ajayi." She hesitated. "Do I need to keep this name?" she asked. Dr. Adebayo looked at her thoughtfully. "Names carry history," he said, "but they don't own you." Naomi folded the paper slowly. "I'll keep it," she decided. "Not for him. For me." Mama Abena nodded approvingly. Years passed quietly, deliberately. Naomi attended a small school run by volunteers passing through the region. She learned mathematics, reading history. She devoured books the way starving people devour food. Knowledge became her refuge, her weapon, her proof of existence. She never spoke of Anthony Ajayi, but she never forgot him. Sometimes at night she sat outside with Hunter and stared toward the distant lights of the city, imagining the world she had been erased from. She imagined Anthony in his office, signing papers, building towers, pretending nothing had happened. The thought no longer filled her with raw pain. It filled her with clarity. One afternoon, a trader brought a newspaper to the village. Naomi glanced at it casually and froze. There was Anthony's face, older now, more lined, still powerful. "Ajayi Group expands mining operations," the headline read. Naomi folded the paper carefully and handed it back without comment. Mama Abena watched her closely that night. "You are changing," she said. Naomi met her gaze. "I'm remembering." Mama Abena nodded. "Memory is not a curse if you use it wisely." By the time Naomi reached adulthood, she was no longer the frightened girl left on a mountain. She had scars, some visible, some hidden, but she carried herself with quiet authority. People listened when she spoke. Children followed her naturally. Dr. Adebayo once said to her, "You would make a dangerous woman." Naomi smiled faintly. "I already am." The world beyond the village continued without her believing she had vanished, and for now, that was exactly how she wanted it. Because Naomi Ajayi was not preparing to return as a victim. She was preparing to return as a reckoning. Naomi's transformation did not arrive with applause or sudden miracles. It came quietly, shaped by routine resistance and resolve. By the time she turned 18, the village no longer saw her as the girl rescued from the mountain. They saw her as someone reliable, someone who finished what she started, someone who did not disappear when things became difficult. She woke before sunrise each day, her body trained to the rhythm of work. She fetched water, helped Mama Abena prepare meals, taught younger children how to read using the few books they shared. When volunteers came and left, Naomi remained. Hunter aged beside her. The dog's muzzle grayed slowly, his steps less energetic than before, but his eyes never lost their sharpness. He followed Naomi everywhere, a silent guardian, a living reminder of survival. People joked that the two were inseparable. They didn't know how literal that truth was. Naomi still had nightmares, though they came less often now. When they did, she no longer woke up screaming. She woke up angry. Anger, she discovered, was easier to live with than fear. One evening, as she sat with Mama Abena shelling groundnuts, Naomi asked a question she had avoided for years. "Do you think people can choose what kind of person they become?" she asked. Mama Abena didn't answer immediately. She continued working her hands steady. "People choose every day," she said finally. "Most just pretend they don't." Naomi absorbed that. Choice, responsibility, consequence. Words her father had built an empire on and ignored at home. Naomi began keeping a notebook. At first it was for schoolwork, then it became something else. She wrote observations, patterns, stories she heard from passing travelers, news fragments from radios and old newspapers. She wrote about Anthony Ajayi, not with emotion, with precision. She learned the structure of his company, the regions it operated in. The complaints whispered about land disputes and displaced communities, the rumors of deals made quietly without accountability. Naomi didn't judge yet, she gathered. Dr. Tunde Adebayo noticed the shift. "You're planning something," he said one afternoon, watching her read a legal pamphlet. Naomi didn't deny it. "I'm preparing. For what?" She looked up at him, calm, unflinching. "To stop pretending my past doesn't matter." Dr. Adebayo studied her face and nodded slowly. "Then you'll need allies," he said. That was how Naomi met Kofi Mensah. Kofi arrived in the village on legal outreach work, representing an organization that provided advice to communities affected by corporate exploitation. He was younger than Naomi expected, sharp-eyed, cautious, and impossible to intimidate. When Naomi approached him with questions, he assumed she was curious. When she continued asking, he realized she was serious. When she showed him her notes, he became silent. "These are not the questions of a student," Kofi said carefully. "They're the questions of someone looking for leverage." Naomi met his gaze. "Is that wrong?" "No," he replied. "It's dangerous." She smiled faintly. "I survived worse." Over the next months, they spoke often. Kofi never asked Naomi to explain herself fully. He taught her instead about corporate law, about documentation, about how truth became powerless without structure. Justice, he told her once, is not just about being right, it's about being precise. Naomi learned quickly. She learned how systems protected people like Anthony Ajayi, how money insulated guilt, how reputation silenced victims. She also learned something else. Systems could be turned against themselves. During this time, news of Anthony Ajayi continued to drift into the village like distant thunder. Expansion projects, awards, public appearances with his son Ethan. Naomi never spoke Ethan's name aloud, but she saw him in photographs. Well-dressed, smiling easily, standing where she once might have stood if her life had followed a different path. She did not hate him. She hated the lie he represented. One evening, Naomi overheard a conversation that hardened her resolve permanently. A trader mentioned an accident near one of Ajayi Group's mining sites, a landslide. Several workers injured, compensation delayed. They say the company denied responsibility, the trader added casually. Said the men were trespassing. Naomi felt something settle coldly in her chest. The same excuse, different victims. That night she sat alone outside Hunter's head, heavy on her knee, the stars sharp above her. "I won't scream," she whispered into the dark. "I won't beg. I won't disappear." She had spent years becoming invisible in order to survive. Now, invisibility would become her weapon. Naomi began making plans, not reckless ones, not fueled by rage, but deliberate steps toward a future she controlled. She applied for scholarships through programs Dr. Adebayo connected her with. She prepared documents. She practiced interviews. When acceptance came, it was quiet. A letter. A chance. Mama Abena held her hands tightly when Naomi told her. "You're leaving," the older woman said. "I'm going forward," Naomi corrected gently. Mama Abena smiled, though her eyes shone with unshed tears. "You'll come back." Naomi nodded. "I promise." On the day Naomi left the village, Hunter walked beside her, slower now, but determined. Mama Abena pressed a small bundle into Naomi's hands. "For strength," she said, "and for memory." Naomi embraced her, holding on longer than necessary. The city welcomed Naomi Ajayi as a stranger. No one recognized the girl once erased. No one knew the mountain had failed. As Naomi stepped into her new life, she carried no illusions. This was not a return for reconciliation. This was the beginning of a reckoning built slowly, patiently, and without mercy. The city didn't greet Naomi Ajayi with kindness or cruelty. It greeted her with indifference. Towering buildings rose where open land once stretched their glass faces, reflecting ambition without memory. Traffic snarled like a living thing. People moved quickly, eyes forward, chasing their own urgencies. In a place like this, Naomi understood immediately survival depended on clarity. You had to know who you were or become whatever the city required. She chose both. Naomi enrolled quietly, her scholarship covering tuition but little else. She found a small room near the campus, narrow and bare, with a window that looked onto a concrete wall. It was enough. She had lived with far less. Each morning she woke before sunrise, reviewed notes, then walked the long route to class to save money. Hunter waited for her back in the village, an arrangement that cut her deeply but felt necessary. The city was not built for old dogs, and Naomi needed him safe. Classes were demanding. Naomi welcomed that. Numbers made sense. Systems made sense. History especially made sense. Patterns repeating, power shifting hands, names changing, while consequences remained. She listened more than she spoke. When professors posed questions, she waited, weighing answers not for correctness, but for usefulness. When classmates argued, she watched the assumptions beneath their words. She learned who sought attention, who sought approval, and who sought leverage. At night, she worked, tutoring, archiving, translating, anything honest that paid. Sleep came in fragments, but Naomi had learned long ago how to function without comfort. She met Kofi Mensah again by design, not chance. He worked out of a modest office downtown, surrounded by files and unfinished coffee. When Naomi stepped inside months later, older and sharper than when he had last seen her, he looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You're different," he said. "I'm focused," Naomi replied. They spoke plainly. Naomi didn't tell him everything she didn't need to. Kofi understood direction even without a full map. "You want access," he said. "Not revenge." Naomi nodded. "I want truth with consequences." Kofi leaned back. "Then you'll need patience and a clean record. I have both." They began meeting weekly, sometimes to discuss law, sometimes to discuss nothing at all. Kofi taught Naomi how institutions protected themselves, how scandals were contained, how narratives were shaped before facts ever surfaced. "Power," he told her once, "is not loud, it's organized." Naomi took that to heart. She changed her appearance subtly, not drastically, just enough. Her hair, once worn simply, was now styled professionally. Her posture was different, her voice steadier. People began to mistake her confidence for privilege. She did not correct them. It made doors easier to open. Naomi secured an internship through merit and persistence. The building she entered each morning was familiar in ways that unsettled her. Glass walls, quiet authority, people who spoke softly because they had nothing to prove. This was Anthony Ajayi's world. She kept her distance at first. Observed, learned. She memorized schedules. She understood hierarchies. She noticed how fear traveled downward and loyalty flowed upward. Her name passed through systems without reaction. Ajayi, a common enough name, a coincidence. At night, Naomi studied company records available to the public, expansion reports, environmental assessments, legal filings. She cross-referenced them with the notes she had kept for years. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. Delayed compensations, vague settlements, communities pushed aside by paperwork and silence. She didn't rush. Naomi waited for the city to forget her completely. When she finally saw Anthony Ajayi again, it was unplanned. She was crossing the lobby when he stepped out of an elevator surrounded by aides. Older now, slower but still commanding. His presence pulled the air toward him like gravity. Naomi froze, not from fear, from recognition. He did not see her at first. He was speaking, gesturing, already moving. When his eyes flicked toward her briefly dismissively, she felt the old ache stir. Then it passed. He didn't recognize her. The realization landed with a strange relief. Anthony Ajayi walked past his daughter as if she were any other professional in the building. Naomi stood very still until he disappeared from view. Later that night, she sat alone in her room staring at the ceiling. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She breathed. This was not the moment. She would not confront him in hallways or demand acknowledgement like a wounded child. If Anthony Ajayi were to see her, truly see her, it would be when he had no choice. Weeks later, she encountered Ethan Ajayi at a conference. He was younger than Anthony by decades, confident in the careless way of people who had never been denied anything. He laughed easily, spoke casually, shook hands as if the world were eager to welcome him. Naomi watched from across the room, an observer in a sea of suits. Ethan spoke about innovation, about responsibility, about progress. The words tasted bitter. Naomi left early. The city continued to press in on her, testing her resolve. There were days she felt the weight of it, but all of the years lost, the warmth denied the father who had chosen absence over accountability. On those days, she walked. She walked until her legs burned and her thoughts quieted. She reminded herself of the mountain, of the cold, of Hunter's warmth, of Mama Abena's steady hands. She reminded herself that survival had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning. One evening, Kofi handed her a file. "Not everything in here is usable," he warned. "Some of it is rumor. Some is incomplete." Naomi opened it slowly. "It's enough," she said. Kofi studied her face. "Once you move forward, you won't be able to go back." Naomi closed the file. "I already can't," she replied. Outside, the city lights flickered on, illuminating towers built on stories people preferred not to tell. Naomi Ajayi stood at the edge of her new life, unseen, underestimated, and entirely prepared. The mountain had not taken her, and soon neither would the man who left her there. Anthony Ajayi had everything he once believed mattered, and yet unease followed him like a persistent echo. From the outside, his life appeared flawless. The Ajayi Group had expanded aggressively across multiple regions, its name stamped onto projects that reshaped landscapes and economies. His public image had been carefully refined over the years: disciplined executive, visionary leader, devoted family man. Photographs showed him beside Ethan, his legitimate son, their smiles calibrated for cameras and investors alike. But at night, when the meetings ended and the corridors emptied, Anthony often sat alone in his study, staring at nothing. He told himself the feeling was age, fatigue, the natural cost of carrying power for so long. He told himself many things. What he never admitted, could never admit, was that something unresolved had begun to surface. It started with sleep. Dreams returned to him uninvited. He saw mountains steep, silent, indifferent. He heard the wind, felt the cold. Sometimes he woke with his heart racing, the image of a girl standing on a rocky path burning behind his eyes. In the mornings, he dismissed it. "Stress," he muttered to himself, tightening his tie. "Just stress," Gloria noticed. "You haven't been yourself lately," she said one evening over dinner, her tone casual, but her gaze sharp. "The board is watching." Anthony nodded absently. "They always are." Gloria's fingers tightened around her glass. "We can't afford distractions." Anthony looked at her, then really looked at her, and for a fleeting moment wondered when their conversations had become nothing but warnings. At the office, subtle problems began to appear. Delays in approvals, unexpected questions from regulators, reports returned with requests for clarification. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be traced directly to him, but enough to disrupt the rhythm he had built his career on. Anthony summoned his executives. "Handle it," he said curtly. Quietly, they assured him they would. Ethan, meanwhile, thrived. He moved through the company with effortless confidence, welcomed as the future of the Ajayi name. He spoke passionately about modernization, about ethics, about sustainability, words that impressed audiences and reassured partners. Anthony watched him from a distance, pride and discomfort twisting together. Ethan was everything the world admired. And yet something about his certainty unsettled Anthony. It reminded him of something he had once been, or perhaps something he had chosen not to be. Rumors reached Anthony in fragments: a community pushing back against a mining expansion, a legal inquiry reopened, a former employee asking inconvenient questions. Each issue was addressed swiftly, decisively, but the frequency troubled him. Patterns were forming. One afternoon, as Anthony reviewed documents in his office, his assistant hesitated at the door. "Sir," she said carefully, "there's been a request for access to archived files, public records." Anthony didn't look up. Approved. Yes, she replied. By the compliance team. Anthony frowned. Compliance rarely initiated anything without pressure. Who requested it? The assistant checked her notes. A junior consultant, recently assigned. Anthony waved it off. Fine. He returned to his work unaware that the name on that request, quiet, unremarkable, belonged to Naomi Ajayi. Across the city, Naomi observed the effects of her presence with controlled patience. She did not interfere directly. She let systems move as they always had, slowly, defensively. She watched how Anthony's organization reacted when pressure came from within rather than from outside. She learned who panicked, who covered, who lied without realizing it. She saw how fear moved through layers of management like a disease, invisible but undeniable. At night, Naomi met with Kofi Mensah. They're tightening, she said calmly, reviewing notes. That means they feel something. Kofi nodded. They don't know what. That's worse. Naomi closed her folder. Anthony Ajayi has spent his life controlling narratives. He won't tolerate uncertainty, and when he discovers the source, Naomi met his gaze. Then we'll see what kind of man he really is. Meanwhile, Anthony's health began to falter. Nothing serious, nothing he would acknowledge publicly, but headaches lingered. His patience shortened. Meetings irritated him. He snapped at aides for minor mistakes. At home, silence thickened. Gloria watched him carefully, her instincts sharpening. She sensed vulnerability and responded with control. You should rest, she suggested one night. Let Ethan handle more responsibilities. Anthony bristled. I'm not finished. Of course not, Gloria replied smoothly. But preparation is strength. Anthony heard the implication and hated it. That night he dreamed again of the mountain. This time the girl turned toward him. He woke drenched in sweat, breath ragged, the name rising to his lips before he could stop it. Naomi. The sound of it startled him. He hadn't spoken that name in years. He sat up slowly, his heart pounding, his mind racing. Why now? Why, after all this time, he told himself it meant nothing. Across the city, Naomi stood at her window watching lights flicker on in towers bearing her family's name. She felt no satisfaction, only a growing certainty. Anthony Ajayi's world was beginning to shift. Not because of fate, because of truth. The past he had buried beneath money and silence had found its way back, not screaming, not accusing, but methodical and patient, just like the girl he had once underestimated. Naomi closed her notebook and turned away from the window. The reckoning was no longer distant. It was already underway. The first real confrontation did not happen with raised voices or dramatic accusations. It happened in silence. Naomi Ajayi chose the moment carefully. It was a late afternoon board briefing routine, predictable. Executives gathered around polished wood, assistants moved quietly along the walls, and Anthony Ajayi sat at the head of the table listening more than he spoke. His presence still commanded attention, though age had softened its edges. Naomi was there as well, seated several chairs away, her posture professional, her expression neutral. To everyone else in the room, she was simply another consultant, competent, quiet, forgettable. To Anthony, she was nothing, and that Naomi realized with a strange calm was her advantage. The meeting progressed without incident. Financial projections, risk assessments, regulatory updates. When it came time for questions, Naomi raised her hand, not abruptly, not insistently. Yes, Anthony said, his eyes flicking toward her with polite detachment. Naomi stood. I have a clarification request regarding the environmental compliance timeline for the northern expansion. Her voice was steady, controlled, exactly as she had practiced. Anthony nodded. Proceed. She outlined her concern, clearly citing dates, documents, discrepancies. Nothing accusatory, just facts arranged in a way that demanded attention. Anthony listened closely now. He asked a follow-up question. She answered without hesitation. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Something passed across Anthony's face, confusion perhaps, or the faintest echo of recognition. Naomi felt it, sharp and electric, but she did not react. The moment passed. Anthony turned back to the table. We'll review that internally, he said. Thank you. The meeting moved on. Naomi sat down, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of proximity. She had spoken to him, challenged him, existed in his space, and he still did not know her. After the meeting, Naomi packed her notes slowly, deliberately. She could feel eyes on her, curiosity, interest, irritation. But she kept her focus narrow. As she stepped into the hallway, a voice stopped her. Ms. Ajayi, She turned. Anthony stood there alone. Now his aides having moved ahead, he studied her with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. "Yes, sir," Naomi replied calmly. "You're new," he said. "Not a question. I joined the consultancy 3 months ago," she said. "I've been assigned to compliance review." Anthony nodded. "You speak with confidence." "I speak with preparation," Naomi replied. Something like a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Preparation is rare." He paused, then added, "Your surname, Ajayi." Naomi felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had anticipated this, rehearsed it. Still, the sound of her name on his lips carried unexpected weight. "It's common," she said lightly. "In this region." Anthony studied her more closely now. Her face, her eyes, her posture. He searched for something familiarity perhaps, but found nothing he could name. "Indeed," he said finally. "Well done in there. Thank you, sir." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You remind me of someone," he said. Naomi held his gaze without flinching. "People say that sometimes." Anthony frowned, slightly unsettled by his own uncertainty. Then he nodded and walked away. Naomi remained still until he disappeared down the corridor. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. That evening she met Kofi Mensah at their usual spot, a quiet cafe tucked between busy streets. She recounted the encounter without embellishment. He noticed, Kofi said. "That's something." "He noticed competence," Naomi replied. "Not me." Kofi sipped his drink thoughtfully. "For now." Naomi leaned back, exhaustion settling into her bones. "He looked at me like I was a puzzle he didn't want to solve." "That's how men like him survive," Kofi said, "by ignoring questions until they go away." Naomi's expression hardened. This one won't. The days that followed were charged with tension. Anthony began requesting Naomi's input more frequently, not because he trusted her, but because something about her unsettled him. He found himself replaying her voice in his head, her phrasing precise, her gaze unwavering. At home, he mentioned her casually to Gloria. "There's a consultant," he said one evening, "sharp, asks inconvenient questions." Gloria looked up from her tablet. "Should I be concerned?" "No," Anthony replied, though he wasn't sure why he said it. "Just interesting." Gloria's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Meanwhile, Naomi continued her work methodically. She uncovered inconsistencies, documented patterns, and passed information quietly through proper channels. She never rushed, never overplayed her hand. She waited. One afternoon, she encountered Ethan Ajayi again, this time alone. They crossed paths in the lobby. Ethan smiled, reflexively extending a hand. "Ethan Ajayi," he said. "I don't think we've met." Naomi took his hand briefly. "Naomi Ajayi." Ethan laughed lightly. "No relation, I hope." Naomi smiled politely. "Not that I'm aware of." Ethan chatted easily, asking about her work, her background. Naomi answered selectively, keeping the conversation pleasant and shallow. As they parted, Ethan paused. "You know you have a strong presence. People listen when you speak." Naomi inclined her head. "I've learned to speak when it matters." Ethan watched her walk away, a faint frown forming on his face, an echo of the same unease that had begun to trouble his father. That night, Naomi sat alone in her room reviewing notes by lamplight. Her phone buzzed with a message from Kofi. "He's circling it red. Stay steady." Naomi typed back a single word. "I am." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city. Somewhere in one of those towers, Anthony Ajayi sat with his doubts, unaware that the quiet woman he couldn't quite place was the daughter he had left to die. Naomi felt no triumph, only readiness. Because the hardest part was still ahead, not exposure, not justice, not consequence, but the moment when Anthony Ajayi would finally look at her and see. The tension did not explode. It tightened. Anthony Ajayi became more alert in meetings, more probing in private discussions. He reviewed documents personally, something he had not done in years. He began asking questions that unsettled his senior managers, questions that cut through rehearsed answers and exposed uncertainty beneath. Naomi watched it all from her position inside the machine. She noticed how his attention lingered when she spoke, how his eyes followed her when she moved around the room, how he sometimes fell silent, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. Recognition hovered close now, dangerously close. Naomi adjusted. She became even more precise, even more professional. She never pushed a point too far. She never argued emotionally. She let the facts do their quiet work. When Anthony tested her with difficult questions, she answered calmly. When he tried to intimidate her with silence, she matched it. One afternoon, as the compliance team reviewed old site reports, Naomi came across a familiar location: the northern ridge, the mountain. Her breath caught for just a second. She said nothing. Instead, she flagged the file for review, citing procedural irregularities. It was enough. Anthony noticed immediately. "This site again," he muttered during the briefing. "Why does it keep resurfacing?" Naomi met his gaze. "Because it was never resolved properly." The room went still. Anthony stared at the report, then at Naomi. "You're thorough." "I was taught to be," she replied. He dismissed the meeting early. Later that day, Anthony requested a private conversation. Naomi entered his office with steady steps, her expression neutral. The door closed behind her with a soft, decisive click. Anthony gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. "Sit," he said. She did. "You've been uncovering things," he began, "things that have been buried for a long time." Naomi nodded. "That's what compliance is for." Anthony leaned back, studying her face. "You're not afraid." "I don't see the benefit," Naomi replied. A muscle in Anthony's jaw tightened. "You remind me of someone I used to know." Naomi felt the words like a blade against her ribs. She did not look away. "People say that she repeated." Anthony stood abruptly and walked toward the window, staring out at the city. "There are stories in this world that should stay buried," he said. "They serve no one." Naomi rose slowly. "Buried stories don't disappear, they rot." Anthony turned sharply. "Be careful." Naomi met his glare without hesitation. "So should you." Silence filled the room, thick and electric. Anthony dismissed her with a wave of his hand. That night, Naomi did not sleep. She paced her room, Hunter's old collar clenched in her hand, a habit she hadn't realized she'd formed. The leather was worn smooth, the metal ring dulled with age. Hunter. She had left him with Mama Abena when she moved to the city. He was too old for this life, too gentle now. He belonged to quiet mornings and familiar ground. But that night she needed him. She called the village. Mama Abena's voice came through the line, warm and steady. "He's resting," she said. "His breathing is slower these days." Naomi swallowed. "I'll come soon." "You're doing what you must," Mama Abena replied. "He knows that." The following week, Anthony's unease grew. Gloria noticed his distraction and responded with control. "You're letting this woman get under your skin," she said one evening. "Fire her." Anthony shook his head. "That would draw attention. Then move her." Gloria pressed. "Out of your sight." Anthony hesitated. "No." The word surprised them both. Meanwhile, Ethan began asking questions of his own. He requested meetings Naomi attended. He asked her opinion on projects. He listened. "You don't talk like the others," Ethan remarked once. Naomi smiled politely. "I don't benefit from pretending." Ethan laughed, but something in his eyes lingered, a curiosity edged with discomfort. One afternoon, Naomi returned to her desk to find an envelope waiting. Inside was a photograph, a grainy image of a mountain path, of a car parked near a clearing, of a girl standing beside a dog. Naomi's hands went cold. There was no note, no sender. She closed the envelope slowly and slid it into her bag. Anthony Ajayi had begun to remember. That evening, he sat alone in his study, the same photograph spread before him. He had found it tucked away in an old folder, something he had never destroyed despite telling himself he had. The mountain stared back at him. He whispered the name again, unable to stop himself. Naomi. The sound of it felt like confession. Anthony did not sleep. Across the city, Naomi stood in her room, staring at the same image. She felt no panic now, only inevitability. The truth had crossed the threshold. There would be no more careful distance, no more shadows. Soon, Anthony Ajayi would know exactly who stood before him. And when he did, Naomi intended to be ready, not to scream, not to plead, but to let him see in full clarity the life that had grown from the place he left her to die. The truth did not arrive all at once. It fractured the room in pieces. Anthony Ajayi called an emergency executive session the morning after he found the photograph. No agenda, no preamble, just a summons that carried weight. Naomi knew before the message reached her inbox. She arrived early, composed, dressed simply. The boardroom was already tense. Voices low, movements cautious. Gloria sat near Anthony, her posture rigid, eyes sharp with suspicion. Ethan entered moments later, confusion written plainly across his face. Anthony began without looking at anyone. There are inconsistencies, he said, in our northern operations, in compliance records, in internal approvals. He paused, then lifted his gaze, landing directly on Naomi. And there are people who seem to know exactly where to look. A hush fell. Naomi met his stare calmly. Inconsistencies don't disappear because they're uncomfortable, she said. They compound. Gloria's eyes flashed. Is this a lecture? It's documentation, Naomi replied. Anthony raised a hand. Enough. He stood, placing both palms on the table. I want a full audit, external if necessary, starting now. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ethan frowned. That will slow everything. Anthony's voice hardened. Then we slow. It was the first time Ethan had ever heard his father choose scrutiny over speed. After the meeting, Gloria cornered Anthony in the corridor. This is reckless, she hissed. You're letting her provoke you. Anthony didn't answer. He was staring at the floor, his jaw tight. Who is she to you? Gloria pressed. Anthony looked up slowly. I don't know. Gloria's breath caught not from relief but fear. Naomi left the building and walked for miles, letting the city blur around her. The pieces were aligning faster now. She could feel it like pressure before a storm. Kofi's warning echoed in her mind. Once this turns public, there's no return. That evening, Ethan requested a private conversation. They met in a quiet office overlooking the city. He closed the door himself. You've been driving this, he said without accusation. Why? Naomi considered him. Up close, he looked younger than she expected, less certain. Because systems don't correct themselves, she replied. People do. Ethan hesitated. Is this about my father? Naomi's gaze held steady. Everything here is about your father. He studied her face, searching. You speak like someone who's been hurt. Naomi nodded. I speak like someone who survived. Ethan leaned back, troubled. If there's something I should know. You should prepare, Naomi said gently, for truths that don't ask permission. He left unsettled. That night, Anthony summoned Naomi to his home. The Ajayi mansion had not changed. The same long driveway, the same polished stone, the same silence pressing in from all sides. Naomi felt nothing as she walked through the doors. Not nostalgia, not fear. Just clarity. Anthony waited in his study. You orchestrated this, he said once they were alone. Naomi didn't deny it. I followed the rules. You followed memories, he snapped. Naomi stepped closer. You followed convenience. They stood facing each other, two lives that had diverged and collided again. Anthony's voice lowered. Why now? Naomi inhaled slowly. Because I learned patience, and because harm doesn't expire. Anthony's eyes searched her face again, more desperately now. Who are you? Naomi reached into her bag and placed the photograph on his desk, the one from the mountain. Then beside it, a second image, a younger Naomi standing beside Hunter, her eyes hollow but alive. Anthony staggered back as if struck. No, he whispered. That's not. My name is Naomi Ajayi, she said quietly. Your daughter. The room seemed to tilt. Anthony's hands shook as he stared at the photographs. You died, he said hoarsely. They said what you needed to believe, Naomi replied, so you could sleep. He sank into his chair, breath ragged. I didn't mean. You meant to leave, Naomi said. You meant not to look back. Tears welled in his eyes, not the clean tears of regret, but the fractured ones of collapse. Gloria burst in moments later, drawn by the raised voices. She froze when she saw Naomi. Anthony looked up at his wife, then back at Naomi. It's her, he said broken. It's Naomi. Gloria's composure shattered. That's impossible. Naomi met her gaze. You always underestimate what survives you. Gloria laughed sharply, hysteria creeping in. This is a trick. It's an audit, Naomi said, and a memory. Ethan arrived then, drawn by the tension. He took in the scene, the photographs, his father's face, Naomi standing unflinching. What's happening? He asked. Anthony couldn't answer. Naomi turned to Ethan. I'm your sister. The word landed like thunder. Ethan stared at her, then at his father. Is this true? Anthony nodded, once defeated. Silence swallowed the room. I didn't know, Ethan whispered. Naomi softened just slightly. I believe you? Gloria's voice cut through. You think this changes anything? She spat. You think the world cares about your sob story? Naomi turned back to her. The world cares about evidence. She opened her folder, documents neatly arranged. Displacement records, safety violations, internal emails. You built a life on erasure, Naomi continued. I rebuilt mine on proof. Anthony buried his face in his hands. The reckoning had arrived, not with screams, not with fists, but with truth laid bare. The next morning, the Ajayi mansion felt like a courtroom. silent, tense, heavy with judgment that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. Anthony Ajayi did not go to the office. For the first time in decades, the empire moved without its center. Calls came in non-stop, messages stacked, board members demanded explanations. But Anthony stayed behind closed doors, trapped in a room with memories he could no longer outrun. Naomi, meanwhile, woke up calm. She had expected to feel something triumph, rage, satisfaction. Instead, there was only focus. Her life had been built on surviving what should have ended her. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here to finish what truth had started. Ethan barely slept. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Naomi's words. "I'm your sister." It was a sentence that rearranged everything. Gloria moved through the house like a cornered animal. Her politeness was gone. Her control had become aggression. She spoke sharply to staff. She barked orders. She watched Naomi with a hostility that no longer bothered hiding. "You think you're clever?" she hissed when Naomi passed her in the hallway. "But you don't understand what you're doing." Naomi paused. "I understand perfectly." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "You're going to destroy this family." Naomi's voice stayed low. "This family destroyed itself. I'm just refusing to be the secret." By noon, Anthony finally emerged from his study. His face looked older, as if the night had carved years into it. He avoided Gloria's gaze. He avoided Ethan's questions. His eyes landed on Naomi and stayed there. "Come," he said hoarsely. "We need to talk." They sat in the same room where he had once planned deals that shaped entire regions. Now the deal in front of him was his own conscience. "I don't know how you're alive," Anthony began, voice shaking. Naomi cut him off gently, not cruelly. "Start with the truth." Anthony swallowed. His hands trembled around a glass of water he didn't drink. "I thought," he whispered, "I thought it would be quiet, clean. I told myself you'd be taken in by someone, that you'd survive and disappear." Naomi's eyes did not change. "That's what you told yourself so you wouldn't feel like a murderer." Anthony flinched as if she had struck him. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of scandal, afraid of Gloria, afraid of losing what I built." Naomi leaned forward slightly. "And I was afraid of dying, alone, on a mountain, with no one hearing me." Anthony's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." Naomi exhaled slowly. "Sorry doesn't return years." Anthony's voice rose, desperation breaking through. "What do you want from me?" Naomi's answer was immediate. "Accountability." Anthony stared at her. "You want my money?" Naomi's mouth tightened, not in anger but disappointment. "You still don't understand. I didn't come back to take what you have. I came back so you can't pretend you never took from me." Anthony sank back, crushed. Ethan entered, then his face drawn. "Father," he began, voice careful, "the board is calling an emergency meeting. There are rumors. People know something is wrong." Anthony looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. The son he had protected, polished, prepared. And now, even Ethan's presence felt like an accusation. Naomi stood. "Let them call the meeting," she said. "I'm coming." Gloria's voice exploded from the doorway. "No, you're not." Naomi turned calmly. "You don't get to decide anymore." Gloria stormed forward, pointing a trembling finger. "You're a ghost." "A mistake. You should have finished dying," Naomi asked softly. Gloria froze her mouth open, hatred shaking her whole body. Anthony snapped. "Enough, Gloria." Gloria turned on him. "You're choosing her over me now, after everything I did to protect you?" Anthony's voice dropped dangerously. "Protect me or protect yourself." Gloria's face twisted. "You're weak." "That's why she came back, because she smelled weakness." Naomi stepped closer. "I came back because I finally had strength." The emergency board meeting took place that evening in the Ajayi Group headquarters. Security tightened. Executives whispered. The atmosphere was tense enough to crack glass. Naomi walked into the building with Kofi Mensah beside her. For the first time, she was not hiding. She was not a quiet consultant with a common surname. She was Naomi Ajayi. The boardroom erupted into murmurs when they saw her enter with Anthony. Ethan took his seat, face pale. Gloria arrived last, her expression rigid, her eyes burning. Anthony cleared his throat. "We have an internal crisis," he began. "One that involves both compliance and personal history." A board member leaned forward. "We've heard rumors. Is it true there's an audit?" Because of Naomi stepped forward before Anthony could finish. "My name is Naomi Ajayi," she said clearly. "I'm Anthony Ajayi's daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the questions began, like gunfire. "Daughter, we've never heard. Where have you been? Why now? What does this mean legally?" Naomi did not flinch. She laid her documents on the table, organized, labeled undeniable. "I'm not here for sympathy," she said. "I'm here because your company has used silence as a weapon for years. Communities displaced, workers injured, settlements hidden, files buried." She looked at Anthony. "Just like me." Anthony's face crumpled. Gloria stood abruptly. "This is a stunt," she shouted. "She's here to blackmail us." Kofi spoke calmly. "If it were blackmail, she'd be asking for money. She's asking for transparency." Naomi continued. "I have records, and I have witnesses ready to speak. This isn't a threat. It's a door opening." Ethan's voice broke the tension. "It's true," he said quietly. "She's my sister." The room spun into chaos, shock, disbelief, calculation. Anthony finally stood, his voice shaking but loud enough to fill the space. "I abandoned her," he confessed, "years ago. I left her on a mountain." Gasps, hands flew to mouths, eyes widened. Naomi's chest tightened, not with victory but with grief, because speaking it aloud did not heal it. And then as the room fractured, Naomi's phone buzzed, a message from Mama Abena, 2 words that stole the air from Naomi's lungs. "Hunter is failing." Naomi's face went still. The boardroom noise faded, the lights blurred. All she could hear was the mountain again, and the sound of a loyal dog breathing through pain. Naomi left the boardroom without another word. She didn't run. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. The doors closed behind her on a storm of voices, lawyers demanding pauses, board members arguing about exposure, Gloria shouting about sabotage. None of it reached her. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her steps steady, her mind singular. "Talk to me," she said into the line. "I'm coming." Mama Abena's voice was soft, controlled. "He's breathing, but it's shallow. Dr. Tunde is here." Naomi nodded, even though Mama Abena couldn't see it. "I'll be there tonight." She booked the first flight out. Kofi caught up to her in the lobby, his expression grave. "Go," he said. "I'll handle what I can here." Naomi met his eyes. "Don't slow it down." "I won't," Kofi replied. "The truth has momentum now." On the flight, Naomi sat by the window watching the city recede into a quilt of lights. For years, she had imagined this moment Anthony exposed the machine-disrupted power, forced to answer. She had never imagined that at the edge of it, she would be thinking only of a dog's breathing. Hunter. The memory of him on the mountain, his warmth, his stubborn presence pressed against her chest. She closed her eyes and counted breaths until the plane touched down. The village was quiet when she arrived, the kind of quiet that listened back. Mama Abena met her at the door, eyes tired but steady. "He's waiting," she said. Hunter lay on his mat, thinner now, his fur dulled by age. His eyes opened when Naomi knelt beside him. His tail moved once. That was all. "I'm here," Naomi whispered, placing her forehead against his. "I'm here." Dr. Tunde Adebayo watched from a respectful distance. "His heart is tired," he said gently. "He's not in pain." Naomi nodded. She didn't need reassurance. She needed time. She stayed with Hunter through the night, telling him stories he couldn't possibly understand and somehow understood anyway. She told him about the city, about the boardroom, about Anthony's face when the truth finally spoke its own name. Hunter's breathing slowed as dawn approached. When it stopped, Naomi didn't scream. She didn't beg. She pressed her palm to his chest and stayed there until the world accepted what her heart already knew. Mama Abena wrapped her arms around Naomi without words. They buried Hunter beneath a wide tree near the edge of the village, the ground soft and forgiving. Naomi placed the old collar on the grave, the metal ring catching the morning light. "You kept me alive," she said quietly. "I'll carry you with me." Back in the city, the reckoning accelerated. Anthony Ajayi released a statement before the markets opened. He admitted to abandoning a child. He announced a full external audit. He stepped down as acting CEO pending investigation. The world responded with disbelief, outrage, calculation. Regulators moved, journalists circled, partners paused deals. The Ajayi Group's stock dipped sharply, then wavered. Gloria did not wait for consequences to reach her. She hired attorneys and prepared counter-narratives, claims of manipulation, of emotional instability, of conspiracy. She framed Naomi as a threat to family unity and corporate stability. The strategy failed. Evidence doesn't argue, It accumulates. Emails surfaced. Settlement delays became dates and signatures. Safety violations became memos ignored. Communities came forward. Workers spoke. The story widened beyond Naomi, and that was the point. Ethan testified voluntarily. He spoke plainly. He didn't perform remorse. He acknowledged privilege and ignorance and the choice to stop pretending not to know. His words didn't absolve him, but they steadied something fragile in the room. Anthony testified last. He did not defend himself. He spoke of fear, how it had shaped his decisions, how he had mistaken control for responsibility. He named the mountain. He named the night. He named his failure. I believed silence could end a problem, he said. I was wrong. Silence multiplied it. When he finished, the room was quiet in a way Naomi recognized the quiet that follows truth when it no longer needs to shout. The findings were swift. Anthony Ajayi was removed permanently from leadership. Gloria was implicated in obstruction and coercion, her influence mapped and documented. Fines were levied, restitution mandated, oversight imposed. The Ajayi group survived but changed, reshaped by scrutiny that could not be negotiated away. Naomi returned to the city with Hunter's absence folded carefully inside her. She declined interviews. She declined book deals. She declined invitations to speak on stages built for spectacle. Instead, she met with communities. She listened. She sat on plastic chairs in open courtyards and let people tell their stories without promising miracles. She worked with Kofi to establish a foundation not bearing her name, not bearing the HGI name that funded legal aid, safety audits, and education in regions once silenced by paperwork. Anthony requested a private meeting. Naomi agreed. They met in a small room, no staff, no security. Anthony looked diminished, still dignified but unarmored. I won't ask for forgiveness, he said. I forfeited the right. Naomi considered him. The man who had left her to die. The man who had finally told the truth. I'm not here to punish you, she said. The consequences already exist. He nodded. Can I be part of the repair? Naomi paused. You can follow the rules. You can listen. You can stop centering yourself. Anthony accepted that with a small broken smile. As Naomi left, he spoke again, hesitant. I'm glad you lived. She turned back once. So am I. That evening, Naomi stood by her window, the city humming below. She touched the collar in her pocket, a habit she hadn't abandoned yet. The mountain was quiet now. Not because it had been forgotten, but because it had been answered. The city felt different after the storm passed. It wasn't quieter, cities never are, but the noise had changed. The frantic edge was gone, replaced by a steadier hum, like a machine that had been forced to slow down and finally examine itself. Naomi Ajayi moved through it with a calm she had earned, not borrowed. She returned to work quietly. Not to the same office, not to the same role. Her days were spent in meetings that didn't make headlines, long tables, in modest rooms. Documents spread out beside cups of cooling tea. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was to clarify, to focus, to insist on timelines. Repair, she had learned, was unglamorous. Kofi Mensah worked beside her, tireless and precise. They built frameworks that outlived outrage, processes that required signatures, follow-ups, verification. Systems that didn't depend on goodwill. You could have taken more, Kofi said one evening as they reviewed a final draft. Power, influence, a name that opens doors. Naomi shook her head. I already know where those doors lead. She spent weekends traveling back to the village. Mama Abena greeted her with the same steady embrace, the same knowing eyes. They sat together under the wide tree where Hunter was buried. The ground settled now, the grass beginning to grow. Naomi talked to him sometimes, not out loud, not in ways that invited pity, just a sentence here and there folded into the wind. I kept going, she would say, like you taught me. The foundation's first reports came back clean. Funds were reaching communities. Safety measures were enforced. Schools reopened. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. Anthony Ajayi kept his distance. He complied with every requirement, every condition. He attended no ceremonies, gave no speeches. When asked for statements, he declined. He lived smaller now by choice or necessity. Naomi didn't care to decide. Months passed. One afternoon, Naomi received a letter. Handwritten. Careful. Anthony requested one last meeting. She didn't owe him anything. She knew that. Still, she agreed on her terms. They met in a public garden open and ordinary, no walls, no doors to close. Anthony arrived early. He stood when he saw her, unsure what protocol remained between them. "Thank you for coming," he said. Naomi nodded and sat. "Say what you need to say." Anthony looked out at the trees, at families passing, at life continuing without reference to his former stature. "I wanted to tell you," he began, "that I'm leaving the city, not to escape, to simplify." Naomi listened. "I've sold properties," he continued, "not for penance, for clarity. I don't expect reconciliation. I don't even expect forgiveness." He paused, struggling. "But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to live in a way that doesn't require erasing people." Naomi met his gaze. "That's your work to do, not mine to witness." Anthony nodded, accepting the boundary. "There's one more thing," he said. Your mother." Naomi raised a hand. "Don't." He stopped immediately. "I don't need you to frame my life," she said calmly. "I don't need you to explain it. I lived it." Anthony's eyes filled, but he said nothing. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them no longer hostile, but firm. "I won't come again," Anthony said quietly. "I won't intrude." Naomi stood. "That's wise." As she turned to leave, Anthony spoke one last time. "I've failed you," he said, "but you didn't fail yourself." Naomi paused, not to soften, not to comfort, just to answer honestly. "No," she said, "I didn't." She walked away without looking back. That evening, Naomi returned to her apartment and opened the window. The city air carried 1,000 stories. She thought of the mountain not with fear, not with anger, but with distance. It had been a place of ending once. Now it was simply a place she had survived. She placed Hunter's collar on the shelf beside her desk, no longer hidden in a pocket. It didn't need to be. Naomi Ajayi did not become a symbol. She did not become a headline. She became something harder and quieter. She became proof. Proof that survival is not the opposite of justice, it's the beginning of it. Proof that silence can be broken without becoming cruel. Proof that forgiveness is not a prerequisite for peace. The mountain did not take her. Her father did not define her. She chose her life, and then she built it carefully, deliberately, and without permission. There are moments in life when survival itself feels like a betrayal. When staying alive seems unfair to those who harmed us. When moving forward feels like letting them off the hook. But survival is not surrender. It is strength in its most patient form. Naomi's story reminds us that kindness doesn't erase consequences and accountability doesn't require hatred. That power built on silence will always crack under truth, and that the deepest justice isn't revenge, it's refusing to disappear. If you were abandoned, unheard, or erased in some way, remember this. The fact that you are still here matters. Your story matters. And choosing to live fully can be the most powerful response of all. What would you have done in Naomi's place? Would you have returned or walked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories of courage, consequence, and hope speak to you, subscribe to this channel. You're not alone, and your voice deserves to be heard.